Welcome back to Leeds Lately. Before we get into this one, if you could just hit that subscribe button down below, that would really help me out. But today's video is going to be about the road back to the Premier League. As you can see by the thumbnail behind me, Leeds United are now in the EFL, the Championship, and we have to try our best to get back to the Premier League. Yesterday I did a video about the 49ers takeover and how that would pan out really, and I talked a little bit about the cash injection we'll get into as well, but today's video is going to be a little bit more in depth about the manager hunt and about the director of football as well. So the three key things that we're going to need to get back to the Premier League is 1, a manager, 2, sporting director to actually have an influence on who we sign, and then that cash injection to be able to afford to buy those players in the end. So let's have a little look at the latest odds then. So at the moment, Daniel Farke is 2-1 to become Leeds manager. We'll go into him a little bit now. So Daniel Farke, a lot of people have been saying that they don't want Farke. He's a bit of a laughing stock. He's a bit of a joke. But when you look at his championship record, it does speak for itself. In 138 championship games, his Norwich side won 71 and only lost 29 games. So that is an excellent record for the Championship. He always bounces back up with Norwich and they never do well in the Premier League. But let's have a look as well at how his play is described. The German applies a traditional gegenpress tactic, a high-intensity attacking style of play which utilises winning the ball high up the pitch and countering it quickly. And that's been categorised on Leeds Live as Bielsa-style gegenpress. And obviously, if he becomes a manager, I'll get a lot more detail on that for you and I will do a full tactical breakdown. But I think what people forget with Daniel Farke is that when he got to the Premier League, Norwich didn't have the funds to give him the good enough players to stay in the Premier League. When you actually look at their team and you actually look at the defence they had every now and again they'd get a good midfielder like a Buendia or such, and Teemu Pukki was an okay striker, but they never got really anybody to back those players up and to fill out the squad. So you kind of have to sympathise with him a little bit in the fact that he did everything he could to get them back to the Premier League and they were brilliant in the Championship. And like I said, he only lost 29 games, won 71. He didn't have the backing when he got to the Premier League. Now, I actually mentioned in my video yesterday, and it may be a bit of a prejudgment from me, that if we did get to the Premier League with Daniel Farke, we would have to then just get rid of him and get a new manager in. But maybe with an actual bit of backing, he could do well. But again, it is a little bit risky, isn't it? And that brings us on to the second favourite in the odds, which is Carlos Corberán. Well, second favourite alongside Steven Gerrard, but we're actually not going to go into Gerrard because I just don't think that he will become the Leeds manager. I don't think he's good enough. Villa fans will say he didn't really have a clue. When it went well, he took the credit. When it went badly, he blamed his players. And I think that really it would be a stupid decision to get him in as the coach. So when we look at Carlos Corberán then, he's not taken a charge of as many championship games as what Daniel Farke has, but when we actually look at his record, 122 matches, 51 wins, 30 draws and 41 losses. He's got 153 goals to 100 scored to 149 conceded, 1.5 points per match. That's not fantastic. Granted, he had a West Brom side who had come down and sort of were starting to become a little bit of a sinking ship, and Huddersfield obviously didn't have the best squad in the world. So there is some sort of caveats with that. Daniel Farke obviously had the best team in the league. So Carlos Corberán then, he's not got a track record for getting a team promoted. Daniel Farke does. He does play the style of football that we would like to see at Ellen Road, or certainly that I would like to see. But the issue becomes that he hasn't got that experience. And when you're wanting someone to bring you up and to kind of guarantee that you do get back up, you kind of start to worry a little bit about Carlos Corberán. I'd love him to come in and be absolutely brilliant, but when you've got to get back up, do you take a risk on somebody like Corberán? When we look a little bit further down the odds, we still have Brendan Rodgers, who we talked about the other day in the video, so if you want to have a look at that, I just basically mentioned how at Leicester he never really had the backing. He never really had the backing to bring in the players that he wanted. and it cost him in the end. They did have a very good squad, but eventually it just wasn't good enough to stay up. And maybe he would have kept them up if he was still in charge. You never know. But certainly, I think he'd be one of the best managers in the Championship, and I think he could get us back up again. But it's whether he'd want to drop down to the Championship. But he's not the Brendan Rodgers that was manager of Liverpool anymore. He's been to Celtic, he's been down to Leicester, and he's sort of, his career's needs probably a little bit of revitalisation. So maybe it could be a good move for Brendan Rodgers to come in at Leeds. Obviously not managing the Championship. I don't think he's ever managed in the Championship. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. But if he has, then it was years and years ago. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how he would set Leeds up, but he'd be more of a safe bet, I would think. And then the other one that we're going to talk about is Diego Flores, who obviously also, as well as Carlos Corberán, used to be one of Bielsa's assistants at Leeds. And let's have a quick look. So he was actually at Godoy Cruz in Argentina after he was assistant manager at Leeds. And in 2022-23, before I think he got sacked, he had 10 matches, 4 wins, 1 draw, 5 losses, and that's a 1.3 points per match. So he's not had that much experience, really, has he? He's been at Leeds as an assistant manager, but after that, his only first-team management role is the one at Godoy Cruz, where he was sacked on April the 11th, 2023. So he's been out of work for a good few months now. And you start to wonder whether that one could be a risk. I think that's like Carlos Corberán, but even riskier. So if I had to go for one of them out of those two, it would be Corberán because he's got that Championship experience already. But yeah, out of those options, when you're actually looking down to them, for me, I think it would still probably be Brendan Rodgers. But Daniel Farke has a track record of getting teams promoted. And as well, he actually has the tools to do that job. He would have the money and the power to buy the players that he wanted for his system to try and take Leeds back to the Premier League. So we could see a bit of a renaissance to Daniel Farke's career now. In Germany, I think he got relegated with, I can't remember which team it was, but Daniel Farke definitely has a relegation to his name in Germany as well as in England. So maybe he's just not good when he gets to the top flight. I don't know, but it seems like a little bit of a risk to take. So yeah, the manager thing should be announced actually by next week. Let me have a little look. I know Phil Hay tweeted the other day, head coach process to be finalised next week. So by the end of next week, if we haven't got a manager, then we should have some sort of solid idea of who it's going to be. And then you'll get a tactics video off me for that one. But yeah, it still remains to be seen who the manager is going to be. But out of those options, then I think Daniel Farke is probably a good one to get us promoted. Carlos Corberán for the sentimental value, but also for the style of football and the way he would want Leeds to play. But then, is that going to then work again at Leeds? You'd have to get some fresh players in for it to work, because you've obviously got the old heads who are used to Bielsa and who know Carlos Corberán very well, and I don't know how well they would take to trying to do that style again. Whether lightning would strike twice and they could get back up again. But I think Carlos Corberán has certainly adapted his own style from Bielsa's, and it's not just the same. So yeah, you would see a difference in that. But yeah, it remains to be seen who the manager's going to be. But at the moment, those are the odds. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the director of football, which is the next one up the hill, up the mountain to the Premier League that I've done on this thumbnail. A new sporting director, a new director of football. And the director of football is so useful because he's the one who runs the scouting department. He's the one who says, this is the player I want to sign, take it to the manager, or these are the players we want to sign. Which one do you think would be best out of these ones? Which one would suit you most? And then the manager that can then pick from those options, rather than the manager doing all the wheeling and dealing themselves. So it's important to have a director of football in place so that they can go out and get talent that they think works for the manager. I'm going to talk about 2 options that we've got today. One of them is Stuart Webber, and he's been the Norwich chief executive since 2017, but he's a Leeds fan. And it's difficult really, because at Norwich they haven't had a massive budget to deal with, but even when they have brought players in, you haven't seen a massive amount of them that are sort of players plucked from nowhere that have gone on to do really well and then sold on. You've only really seen Emi Buendia, and then Todd Cantwell at one point was being talked about going for quite a lot of money, about £30 million, I think it was. But I just think that he's not turned around enough good deals for me to warrant him getting this job at Elland Road, if you know what I mean. I think it's really about the fact that he's had Norwich in the Premier League multiple times, and yes, they haven't got the biggest budget in the world, but you've seen teams on a shoestring budget like Burnley, like Bournemouth, manage to stay up for multiple seasons in the Premier League before, and that goes for good recruitment and a bit of good management as well mixed in. But good recruitment is one of the main things that keeps you up in the Premier League, and even in the Championship as well, you have to have decent recruitment to get you to the highest level, and probably even more so in the Championship. You have to be careful with your money because you don't get that much to spend. So when you are signing a £5 to £10 million player, they're actually quite an expensive player in the Championship, and they have to work. So he hasn't turned around that many amazing ones. Like I say, the only really ones you can think of where he turned a good profit was Buendia and Cantwell as well. But Cantwell in the end went for peanuts to I can't even remember where he went now, but that's how badly wrong that one went. And the other one, ironically, is Kieran Scott, the 38-year-old at Middlesbrough. He was actually under Webber at Norwich, and when he was shipped over to Middlesbrough, he's been there for the last few years now. He sacked Neil Warnock and appointed Chris Wilder. And then he also appointed Michael Carrick, which is obviously proven to be a success in the end. But yeah, they got to the playoffs, and then Coventry beat them there. So he's shown that he's got that little bit of nous to A, getting a really good manager, and B, granted it didn't work first time, but then also recruit in the right way to get that team to the playoffs, because Middlesbrough have been sort of floating around in obscurity for a few years now, and the fact that they were able to get to the playoffs through obviously Michael Carrick's brilliance as a manager, but also the recruitment that they did to fill that team with players who were good enough to get there, is more impressive to me. And I think if I was to pick one of the two, it would be Kieran Scott. We were also linked with the guy from Genk as well, but I don't think that one's on the cards anymore. So it could be that we see Kieran Scott come in as the sporting director, and I wouldn't be massively disappointed with that. I think what you'd see from somebody like Kieran Scott is you're more likely to get the best of the Championship. We were promised the best of the Championship via Victor Orta. He said that's the way we would recruit. We'd pick the best of the Championship and then maybe get some signings from abroad as well to supplement and to complement that. But that never really happened, and we never really signed anyone from the Championship. So you'd hope that somebody like Kieran Scott, given the fact that he's been with Middlesbrough for a few years now and spent his time in the Championship, he knows who all the best players are. Obviously, you can just tell anyway, but he has that experience of seeing them week in, week out play against Middlesbrough, or even some of the players for Middlesbrough. And if he was to come in, you'd like to think that he would go, okay, well, let's look at Hamer and at Coventry, and let's look at Gyökeres at Coventry, and then Manning the left back, and I think he would certainly have a good look around, and Joel Pirot at Swansea as well, and I think he would see the best of the Championship and try and implement that into the Leeds team. So I think Kieran Scott would be a good shout for me as well. He probably actually knows Daniel Farke from his time at Norwich. So that could be a good link up there again as well. But yeah, that one remains to be seen as well. There's no news on when that'll be confirmed. But for me, I'd like to see a sporting director come in before a manager so that they can help with the managerial selection process and interview process. But it doesn't look like it's going to happen that way around. So that's the current sort of who's been linked as managers and as a sporting director as well. And then the only other one is the fact that we've got this cash injection now. I talked about in yesterday's video as well. But I will just quickly go over it again, just for those of you who didn't see that, because I feel like it's quite important to mention. But yes, apparently the 49ers will be injecting some cash to try and get Leeds straight back up into the Premier League. Because if they didn't take over Leeds, we were going to have a self-sufficient window, because Radrizzani didn't necessarily have the resources and the money to carry on pouring money into Leeds to get us back up again. He probably would have just used the parachute payments, which will be about £45 million this year. And so, yeah, they're going to have a little bit of an extra investment of cash. And what that's basically, long story short, going to allow us to do is to hold on to the players that we've currently got, not forever, but just long enough so that we can get good deals out of them. So we're not forced to sell Tyler Adams, Brendan Aronson, all these sorts of players straight away to get the money in to then fund more transfers. We can actually do those deals, buy players, and then we can wait and hold out and get better deals for those players that we are selling. So it puts us, all it does is just puts us in a bit of a better position bargaining wise. We will probably get some loans in as well, some maybe loan to buy, some loans, and a few purchases as well. You'll see a lot of movement in the coming weeks, but at the moment there's nothing happening in the foreground. In the background there certainly is, but there's nothing that's sort of visible to us Leeds fans. But I will keep you updated when there is news, and like I say, you'll get a tactics video, you'll get sign-ins videos, you'll get everything like that. Plenty of content on the way, so make sure you hit that sub button. I hope you're enjoying the content at the moment. I'm trying to get back into the swing of things now. We've got this new era coming, and some people bloody nearly have a heart attack because I've uploaded twice in a row, 2 days in a row, and a live stream for the Champions League final. But yeah, thanks for watching Leeds Lately, and I'll see you next time.